My name is Dorothy Reynolds, and I was born in 1960 in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. I came into this world as the second daughter of Margaret and William Reynolds, a couple who worked hard but never seemed to catch a break. My older sister, Catherine, was the golden child, beautiful, charismatic, everything I wasn't. From the moment I could understand words, I knew my place in the family hierarchy. I was the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who would always be there. Growing up, I learned early that life doesn't always give you what you dream of. While other girls my age talked about wedding dresses and future husbands, I was helping my mother with household chores and making sure my father took his heart medication on time. It wasn't that I didn't want those things. I did. I wanted them desperately. But somehow, life had other plans for me, plans I never saw coming until it was too late to change course. But let me tell you something that will make your blood run cold. At 60 years old, after dedicating my entire life to taking care of everyone else, the person I loved most in this world, the child I raised as my own, looked me straight in the eye, changed the locks on what I thought was my home, and called me greedy. Can you imagine that? Greedy. After everything I'd sacrificed, every dream I'd buried, every tear I'd swallowed in silence. That moment was supposed to break me. That's what she thought, anyway. But what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I had been preparing for betrayal my whole life. And I had one card left to play, one document hidden away that would change everything. I'm going to tell you my story from the very beginning, because you need to understand how I got here. You need to see the little girl who became the woman, who became the aunt, who became the homeless woman standing on the street with nothing but a suitcase. And then you need to see what happened next. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It doesn't come with shouting or violence. It comes in silence, in patience, in the careful unfolding of truth. If you're listening to this story, I want you to stay with me until the end. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, because what I'm about to share with you will make you question everything you think you know about family, loyalty, and justice. This is my story, the story of Dorothy Reynolds, the woman who learned that sometimes the meek really do inherit the earth. I don't remember much about being very young, but I remember feelings. I remember the feeling of being invisible, of being the shadow next to my sister's light. Catherine was 5 years older than me, and she had this way of filling up a room just by walking into it. She was the kind of beautiful that made people stop and stare, blonde hair that caught the sunlight, blue eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and a laugh that sounded like music. Me, I had mousy brown hair that never quite laid right, eyes that were neither blue nor green, but some forgettable color in between, and a body that was always a little too round, a little too awkward. I wasn't ugly, my mother would say, trying to be kind. I was just plain Dorothy. It became almost like a nickname in my head, the way I thought of myself. Our house was small, a 2-bedroom place where Catherine and I shared a room until she turned 16 and demanded her own space. After that, I slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. My parents couldn't afford anything bigger. Dad worked at the factory, the same job he'd had since he was 18, and Mom cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the other side of town. They worked themselves to the bone, but money was always tight. Catherine hated our life. She hated the small house, the second-hand clothes, the way we had to count pennies before buying anything. She promised herself she'd get out, marry rich, live the life she deserved. And you know what? She did. At 21, she met Thomas Bradford, a lawyer from the city, who was visiting our town for a case. 6 months later, they were married in a ceremony that cost more than my parents made in a year. Thomas paid for it all, and my sister moved to the city, into a beautiful house with a white picket fence and a future that looked nothing like ours. I was 16 when Catherine left, and suddenly all the responsibility that had been shared between two daughters fell on my shoulders alone. I didn't mind at first. I loved my parents, and taking care of them felt like purpose. I helped Mom with her cleaning jobs after school, learned to cook Dad's favorite meals, managed the household finances because Mom wasn't good with numbers. I became essential, necessary, the daughter they could count on. I had dreams, though. I wanted to be a teacher. I was good with children, patient and kind. I tutored neighborhood kids for free, helped them with their homework, watched their faces light up when they finally understood something difficult. It felt like magic, being able to give someone that gift of understanding. I'd been accepted to the state college with a partial scholarship, and I'd been saving money from a part-time job at the local diner to cover the rest. But then Dad had his first heart attack. I was 17, 3 months away from high school graduation. He survived, but the medical bills were crushing, and he couldn't work anymore. The factory gave him a small disability check, but it wasn't enough. Mom took on more cleaning jobs, worked until her hands were raw and cracked, but it still wasn't enough. I made the decision without telling anyone. I withdrew my college acceptance, told them I'd decided not to go. I picked up more hours at the diner, eventually became a full-time waitress after graduation. The tips were good, and every penny went into the household jar on the kitchen counter. My parents protested at first, said I should follow my dreams, but their protests were weak. They needed me, and we all knew it. Catherine came home twice a year, at Christmas and for a week in the summer. She'd sweep in with expensive presents and stories about her glamorous life in the city, her charity galas, and country club memberships. She never offered to help with money, not once. And my parents never asked. They were so proud of her success, so happy that at least one of their daughters had escaped the trap of poverty. I was proud of her too, or at least I told myself I was. It's hard to admit you're jealous of your own sister. Harder still to admit that you're starting to resent her. The years passed like that, bleeding into each other. I waitressed, came home, cooked, cleaned, managed medications, paid bills. I went on a few dates here and there, but they never went anywhere. The men I met wanted someone without baggage, without elderly parents who needed constant care, without the weight of responsibility pressing down on them. I understood. I wouldn't have wanted me either. By the time I turned 30, I had accepted my life for what it was. I wasn't going to be a teacher. I wasn't going to get married or have children. I was going to be the daughter who stayed, who sacrificed, who held everything together. And honestly, most days I was okay with that. My parents needed me, and there was something noble in that, something that felt like love in its purest form. Dad's health continued to decline. The first heart attack was followed by a second one when I was 23, then a third when I was 27. Each one left him a little weaker, a little more dependent. By 30, he could barely walk from the bedroom to the bathroom without getting winded. I learned how to give injections, monitor blood pressure, recognize the signs of cardiac distress. I became his nurse, his companion, his lifeline. Mom developed arthritis in her hands and knees. The years of scrubbing floors and carrying heavy cleaning supplies had taken their toll. She had to quit her cleaning jobs, which meant we were living entirely on Dad's disability check and my waitressing income. We qualified for food stamps, which helped, but poverty has a way of grinding you down, of making every day feel like a struggle for survival. I watched my 30s slip away like sand through my fingers. The other waitresses at the diner would talk about their lives, their husbands, their children, their weekend plans. I'd smile and nod, participate when I could, but I always felt like I was watching life through a window rather than living it. I was the reliable one, the one who would cover someone's shift when their kid was sick, the one who never asked for time off because what would I do with it anyway? Catherine had a daughter when I was 32. She named her Melissa, and she was the most beautiful baby I'd ever seen. Catherine brought her home to visit when she was 3 months old, this tiny perfect creature with her mother's blonde hair and her father's strong features. I held her in my arms and felt something crack open inside my chest, something that felt like longing and grief all mixed together. "You're so good with her," Catherine said, watching me rock Melissa to sleep. "You would have made a wonderful mother, Dorothy." Would have. Past tense. As if that door had already closed. As if we both knew it was never going to happen for me. I was 32 years old, unmarried, living with my aging parents, working as a waitress. What man was going to want that? What life was going to magically appear and give me the chance to be a mother? But I pushed those thoughts away and focused on the warm weight of the baby in my arms. At least I had this moment. At least I had this. Catherine came home more often after Melissa was born, usually without Thomas, who was always too busy with work. She'd stay for a few days, let me and Mom fuss over the baby while she caught up on sleep. I loved those visits. I loved watching Melissa grow from a tiny infant into a curious toddler, loved the way she'd reach for me with her chubby little hands, the way she'd laugh at my silly faces. When Melissa was 2, Catherine sat me down and asked me something I never expected. "Dorothy," she said, her voice serious in a way that made me nervous. "Thomas and I are having problems. I don't know if we're going to make it. If something happens, if we split up, would you help me with Melissa? Would you be there for her?" "Of course," I said immediately. "Always. Whatever you need." I meant it. I would have done anything for that little girl, for my sister. Family was everything to me. Even if I was starting to realize that not everyone in the family felt the same way. Dad died when I was 38. It was his 4th heart attack, and this time his body just couldn't take it anymore. He died in his sleep, peacefully, and I was grateful for that at least. But his death left a hole in our house that felt impossible to fill. Mom took it hard. They'd been married for 45 years, and suddenly half of her was just gone. I took a week off work for the funeral, the first time I'd asked for time off in years. Catherine came home with Melissa, who was 6 years old by then and didn't really understand why everyone was crying. The funeral was small, just close friends and family. We buried Dad in the town cemetery, under a tree that bloomed pink flowers every spring. After everyone left and Catherine went back to the city, it was just me and Mom in that quiet house. She aged 10 years in the months after Dad died. The grief consumed her, made her smaller, frilier. I tried to be strong for both of us, tried to keep our routines going, but everything felt different now, harder. That's when Catherine dropped the bomb that would change everything. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice shaking. "Dorothy, I need your help. Thomas and I are getting divorced. It's ugly. He's fighting me for custody of Melissa, and I can't do this alone. Can I come home? Can we stay with you and Mom for a while?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Come home. We'll figure it out together." I had no idea that this decision would be the beginning of the end of the life I knew. Catherine and Melissa moved back home 2 weeks later. They arrived with suitcases and boxes, the remnants of a life that had fallen apart. Melissa was 7 years old, confused and scared by the upheaval. Catherine was a wreck, angry, hurt, bitter about the divorce. Thomas had cheated on her with a paralegal at his firm, and she'd caught them together. The marriage was over, and she was determined to take him for everything she could get. I gave them my room, moved back to the pull-out couch in the living room. It felt like going backward in time, like I was 16 again, sacrificing my space for my sister. But I didn't mind. Melissa needed stability, and I was going to give her that. The divorce took 2 years to finalize, 2 years of bitter fighting over assets and custody. In the end, Catherine got the house, a substantial settlement, and primary custody of Melissa. Thomas got visitation rights and a lot of resentment. Catherine sold the house immediately, took the money, and announced she was staying in our hometown. "I can't go back there," she said. "Too many memories. Too much pain. This is home now. This is where I want to raise Melissa." She bought a small house 3 blocks away from us, and I helped her move in. I painted bedrooms, hung curtains, assembled furniture. I was good at that, at being useful, at being needed. Melissa started at the local elementary school, and I watched her walk to the bus stop every morning, her backpack almost as big as she was. Mom's health continued to decline. The arthritis spread to her spine, made it painful for her to move. She developed diabetes, then high blood pressure. I became her full-time caretaker, managing multiple medications, doctor's appointments, physical therapy sessions. The diner let me switch to night shifts so I could take care of Mom during the day, sleep a few hours in the afternoon, then work from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. I was exhausted all the time, running on coffee and determination. But Catherine needed help too. She'd gotten a job as a receptionist at a local dentist's office, and her hours often ran late. So I became Melissa's second mother. I picked her up from school when Catherine couldn't, helped with homework, made dinner, attended school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Melissa was a sweet child, smart and curious. She loved to read, would curl up next to me on the couch with a book and read aloud in her careful, measured voice. I cherished those moments, felt like maybe I was getting a taste of motherhood after all, even if it was secondhand. "Aunt Dorothy," she said to me one evening when she was 9 years old, "why didn't you ever have kids of your own?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. How do you explain to a child that life doesn't always give you what you want? That sometimes circumstances and duty and bad timing conspire to steal your dreams away? "I never found the right person," I said finally, which was true as far as it went. "But I have you, sweetheart, and that makes me pretty lucky." She hugged me tight, and I felt my eyes burn with tears I wouldn't let fall. Catherine started dating again when Melissa was 10. A series of men came and went, none of them lasting more than a few months. She was looking for something, trying to fill the hole Thomas had left, but she was looking in all the wrong places. I worried about her, about the example she was setting for Melissa, but I kept my mouth shut. It wasn't my place to judge. Mom died when I was 45. She went peacefully in her sleep, just like Dad had. I found her in the morning when I went to give her medication, and she looked so peaceful that for a moment I thought she was just sleeping deeply. But she was gone, her hand already cold when I touched it. I was alone now, truly alone for the first time in my life. The house felt enormous and empty. I kept expecting to hear Mom calling for me, kept turning to tell her something before remembering she wasn't there anymore. The grief was overwhelming, but so was the guilt, because underneath the sadness was a tiny, terrible sense of relief. I was free. At 45 years old, I was finally free to live my own life. Except I didn't know how to do that. I'd spent nearly 3 decades taking care of other people, and I didn't know who I was without that role. Catherine handled the funeral arrangements this time. She was efficient, organized, making decisions quickly while I drifted through the days in a fog of grief. After the funeral, she sat me down with paperwork. "Mom left everything to both of us," she said. "The house, her savings account, which isn't much, but it's something. We need to decide what to do with it." "I don't care," I said honestly. "You decide." Catherine looked at me carefully. Dorothy, are you okay? I'm worried about you. You look exhausted. I was exhausted. Bone deep, soul-crushing exhausted. I'd been running on empty for so long that I didn't remember what it felt like to be rested. I'm fine. I lied. I just need some time. Catherine made an unexpected suggestion. Why don't you move in with me and Melissa? The house is paid off. There's plenty of room. We can sell Mom's house, split the money, and you can finally have a real bedroom again. Think about it. I thought about it for exactly one day before saying yes. The truth was, I couldn't stand being in that house alone, couldn't handle the silence and the memories. Moving in with Catherine and Melissa felt like a lifeline, a chance to still be needed, still be useful. We sold Mom's house for a decent price and split the money evenly. I put my half in a savings account and tried not to think about how this was the most money I'd ever had at one time, and it had come from my mother's death. Catherine's house became my home. I had a real bedroom again, with a door that closed and everything. Melissa was 12 by then, on the edge of adolescence, starting to care about clothes and boys and fitting in at school. Catherine was working longer hours at the dentist's office, had been promoted to office manager, which meant more responsibility and more stress. I fell into a routine easily. I'd work my night shifts at the diner, come home and sleep until early afternoon, then wake up and take care of the house. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, grocery shopping. I helped Melissa with her homework, drove her to friends' houses and soccer practice and dance lessons. I was the stable presence in the house, the one who was always there, always reliable. Catherine started going out more in the evenings, meeting friends for drinks, going on dates. I didn't mind being Melissa's babysitter. I loved spending time with her, loved feeling like I was part of raising her. She called me Aunt Dorothy, but sometimes when she was tired or sick, she'd slip and call me Mom, then quickly correct herself. Those moments broke my heart and healed it at the same time. You're so good to her, Catherine said to me one evening, watching me help Melissa study for a history test. I don't know what I'd do without you, Dorothy. You're like the mother she has when I can't be. I should have heard the warning in those words, should have recognized the way she was already positioning me as the backup, the substitute, the one who did the hard work while she got to be the fun parent. But I was too grateful to be needed, too happy to have purpose, to see what was really happening. Melissa became my world. I attended every school event, every performance, every game. I was the one who stayed up with her when she had the flu, who held her when she cried over her first heartbreak at 14, who taught her to drive when she got her learner's permit. Catherine was there too, but she was always a bit distracted, always checking her phone, always thinking about work or her latest boyfriend. When Melissa was 16, Catherine met Robert. He was different from the other men she'd dated. Older, stable, wealthy. He owned a construction company and had never been married. Catherine fell hard and fast, and within 6 months they were engaged. Finally, Catherine said, showing me the ring, a massive diamond that must have cost a fortune. Finally, I'm getting the life I deserve. They got married in a small ceremony at the courthouse, and Robert moved into the house with us. Things changed after that. Robert was nice enough to me, but he had clear ideas about how things should be. He didn't like that I worked nights, said it was disruptive when I came home at 2 a.m. He didn't like that I was so involved in Melissa's life, said it was Catherine's job to parent her daughter, not mine. I felt myself becoming invisible again, the way I'd been as a child. I tried to make myself smaller, quieter, less intrusive. I picked up more shifts at the diner, stayed out of the house as much as possible. But Melissa still came to me with her problems, still knocked on my door late at night when she needed to talk. I was her constant, her safe place, and I wasn't going to abandon her no matter how uncomfortable Robert made me feel. Things really went bad when Melissa turned 18 and graduated from high school. She'd been accepted to a good state college about 2 hours away, and she was excited about starting her new life. Catherine and Robert were going to pay for her tuition and living expenses. One night, a week before Melissa was supposed to leave for college, she came to my room crying. "Aunt Dorothy, I don't want to go. I don't feel ready. I want to stay here, take a gap year, figure out what I really want to do." I held her while she cried, stroked her hair the way I had when she was little. "Whatever you decide, I support you," I said. "It's your life, sweetheart. You have to do what feels right for you." She told Catherine the next morning at breakfast. Robert exploded. "Absolutely not," he said. "We're not supporting a freeloader who wants to sit around the house doing nothing. You're going to college, or you're getting a job and paying rent." Catherine, surprisingly, backed him up. "Robert's right, Melissa. We've invested too much in your education to let you throw it away. You're going to college." Melissa looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Aunt Dorothy." And I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I said, maybe she just needs more time. Maybe forcing her to go when she's not ready. "This is none of your business, Dorothy," Catherine snapped. "She's my daughter, not yours. Stop trying to undermine my parenting." The words stung like a slap. After everything I'd done, after all the years of raising Melissa alongside her, I was being told to back off, told I had no say, told she wasn't really mine. Melissa went to college 2 weeks later. After Melissa left, the house felt different. The tension between Catherine, Robert, and me had been building for months. But with Melissa gone, there was no buffer anymore, no reason for everyone to play nice. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly worried about saying or doing the wrong thing. Robert started making comments about my contribution to the household. "You're not paying rent," he'd say. "The least you could do is keep the house cleaner." Never mind that I was the one who had been cooking and cleaning for years, that I'd helped Catherine through her divorce, that I'd raised her daughter while she worked and dated and rebuilt her life. I started paying rent. It wasn't much, but it was something, a way to prove I wasn't just a freeloader. I picked up more shifts at the diner, worked 6 nights a week instead of 5. I was 50 years old, my feet hurt constantly, and I was so tired I could barely think straight. But I needed to prove I was earning my place in a house that I'd helped maintain, in a family I'd given everything for. Catherine changed after she married Robert. She became harder, more materialistic, more focused on appearances. She started dressing differently, wearing expensive clothes and jewelry that Robert bought her. She joined a gym, got her hair done at a fancy salon, started talking about investments and property values. She was becoming the person she'd always wanted to be, the person who had escaped our working class roots and made something of herself. And I was becoming a burden, a reminder of where she'd come from, something embarrassing she had to explain to her new friends. I saw the way she'd tense up when I came home from work in my waitress uniform, smelling like French fries and coffee. I saw the way Robert would look at me like I was a stray dog Catherine had foolishly taken in. Melissa came home for Thanksgiving that first year, and it was like seeing a stranger. College had changed her. She dressed differently, talked differently, carried herself with a confidence I'd never seen before. She was friendly to me, but distant, like I was an aunt she saw once or twice a year instead of the woman who had raised her. "How's school?" I asked, trying to bridge the gap between us. "Good," she said, looking at her phone. "Really good. I'm thinking about majoring in business, like Robert suggested." Robert suggested. Not what she wanted, not what interested her, but what Robert suggested. I bit my tongue, remembered that she wasn't my daughter, that I had no say. The next few years were a slow erosion of my place in the family. I worked, paid rent, tried to be invisible. Melissa came home less and less, Christmas and a few days in the summer. And even then she seemed eager to leave, eager to get back to her real life. Catherine and Robert started taking expensive vacations, cruises, and trips to Europe that I wasn't invited on. The house was theirs, and I was just living in it. When I turned 55, I started thinking about my future for the first time in decades. I had some money saved up from my inheritance and from years of careful budgeting. Not a lot, but enough to maybe rent a small apartment, maybe even buy a tiny house if I could find one cheap enough. I started looking at options, started imagining what it would be like to have my own space again, to not feel like I was imposing on someone else's life. But then Catherine got sick. It started with a persistent cough that wouldn't go away. She went to the doctor, got some tests done, and came home with news that stopped my world. Lung cancer, stage 3. She'd never smoked a day in her life, but somehow the cancer had found her anyway. Everything shifted again. Robert was useless in a crisis. He couldn't handle seeing his wife sick, couldn't deal with the reality of mortality. He threw money at the problem, paid for the best doctors and treatments, but he couldn't be there emotionally. He'd leave the house early in the morning and come home late at night, avoiding the ugliness of illness. So once again, I became the caretaker. I took Catherine to chemotherapy appointments, held her hand through the nausea and pain, cleaned up when she was too weak to make it to the bathroom. I'd done all this before with my parents, and my body remembered how, even if my heart was breaking. Melissa came home when she heard about the cancer. She was 23 by then, working in marketing for a tech company in a city 3 states away. She stayed for a week, crying and promising to visit more often, but then she left, and the visits never materialized. Too busy with work, too busy with her life. I understood, but I also resented it a little. This was her mother dying, and I was the one holding vigil. Catherine fought hard for 2 years. She went through chemotherapy, radiation, more chemotherapy. She lost her hair, lost weight, lost the vitality that had always defined her. But she was determined to live, determined to beat it. And for a while, it looked like she might. The cancer went into remission when Catherine was 58 and I was 56. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, said she'd beaten the odds. We celebrated quietly, just the 2 of us, because Robert was away on a business trip, and Melissa couldn't get time off work. Catherine cried in my arms, and for a moment we were just sisters again, just 2 women who had survived everything life had thrown at us. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said. "You saved my life, Dorothy. You've always saved me." Those words meant everything to me. They felt like acknowledgement, like appreciation, like maybe all the sacrifice had been worth it after all. Catherine's recovery was slow but steady. Her hair grew back, white now instead of blonde, and she decided to keep it that way. She said it made her look distinguished. Robert seemed relieved that his wife was going to live, but he was different now, more distant. I wondered if the cancer had broken something between them, if seeing death up close had changed how he felt about their marriage. But Catherine seemed happy. She started painting, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. She joined a cancer survivors support group, made friends with other women who understood what she'd been through. She was building a new life, a post-cancer life, and she seemed genuinely content. I was happy for her. Truly, I was. But I also realized that I'd put my own plans on hold again. I was 58 years old, still working at the diner, still paying rent to live in my sister's house, still waiting for my life to start. When was it going to be my turn? When was I going to get to be the priority? Then Catherine got the news that changed everything. A distant cousin we barely knew, Aunt Helen from Dad's side of the family, had died and left Catherine a substantial inheritance. Not millions, but enough to pay off the house completely and have money left over for renovations and investments. Aunt Helen had been wealthy, married well, and never had children. She'd left her money to her closest living relatives, which meant Catherine got a big chunk, and I got a smaller amount. Catherine was ecstatic. Finally, she said, finally, we don't have to worry about money. Finally, we can live the way we deserve to. She paid off the mortgage immediately. Then she started planning renovations, a new kitchen, new bathrooms, refinished floors. The house was going to be transformed into something beautiful, something worthy of the life she'd built. "What are you going to do with your inheritance?" she asked me. "Save it," I said. "Maybe eventually buy my own place, something small." She looked at me strangely. "Why would you do that? You live here. This is your home too." But it didn't feel like my home. It felt like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome, someone tolerated but not truly wanted. The renovations took 6 months. During that time, Catherine's health started declining again. The cancer had come back, this time in her bones and liver. "Stage 4 now," the doctors said. "Terminal." She had maybe a year, maybe less. She took the news calmly, like she'd been expecting it. "I'm not going to do treatment this time," she said. "I'm tired, Dorothy. I'm so tired of fighting. I just want to enjoy whatever time I have left." Robert left her. I couldn't believe it, but he actually left his dying wife. He moved out one day while she was sleeping, took his things, and sent divorce papers a week later. He claimed they'd grown apart, that the marriage had been over for a while, that he deserved to live his own life. Catherine was heartbroken, but also relieved. She said she didn't want him there anyway, didn't want to die while married to someone who didn't really love her. Melissa came home to stay this time. She quit her job, moved into her old bedroom, and we became a trio, 3 women waiting for the inevitable. Catherine's final months were both beautiful and heartbreaking. She was clear about what she wanted: to die at home, surrounded by the people she loved, without aggressive medical intervention. She hired a hospice nurse who came 3 times a week, but most of the care fell to me and Melissa. I'd like to say that Melissa and I grew close during this time, that we bonded over taking care of Catherine. But the truth was more complicated. Melissa was grieving her mother, and I was just the aunt, the helper, the support staff. She was polite to me, grateful for my help, but there was a wall between us that hadn't been there when she was younger. Catherine spent her days painting, even when her hands shook so badly she could barely hold the brush. She painted flowers and sunsets and abstract swirls of color. She gave most of the paintings away to her friends from the support group, but she saved one for Melissa, a portrait of a mother and daughter standing together under a tree. "This is us," she told Melissa. "This is how I want you to remember me." One evening, when Catherine was having a good day, she called me into her room. "Dorothy, sit down. I need to talk to you about something important." I sat in the chair next to her bed, and she took my hand. Her skin was thin as paper now, her bones visible beneath it. "I've updated my will," she said. "Everything goes to Melissa, the house, the money, everything. But I've included something for you too. I want you to stay in the house as long as you want. I've made it clear in the will that Melissa has to let you stay. You've earned that after everything you've done for this family." Tears ran down my face. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you, Catherine." "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you more, didn't acknowledge everything you gave up for us. You were the best sister, the best aunt. Melissa is lucky to have you." She died 3 weeks later, on a quiet Sunday morning. I was holding her hand, and Melissa was on the other side of the bed. Catherine opened her eyes one last time, smiled at us, and then she was gone. Just like that, peaceful and quiet, the way she'd wanted. The funeral was big, much bigger than our parents' funerals had been. Catherine had made friends during her years in town, and they all came to pay their respects. Robert showed up too, had the nerve to cry, to act like he'd lost something precious. I wanted to scream at him, but I kept my composure. For Catherine's sake, I stayed silent. After the funeral, after everyone had left, and the house was quiet again, Melissa and I sat in the living room. She was 25 years old now, beautiful like her mother had been, confident in a way I'd never been. "What are you going to do now?" I asked her. "I'm going to keep the house," she said. "Mom wanted me to have it. I'm going to live here, fix it up even more. This is my inheritance, my future. And me?" I asked quietly. "Your mom said I could stay." Melissa looked at me, and in that moment I saw something in her eyes that made my blood run cold. It was calculation, cold and clear. "We'll see," she said. "We'll have to see how things work out." A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed it away. She was grieving. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. This was Melissa, the little girl I'd raised, the child I'd loved as my own. She wouldn't turn me out. She couldn't. But I was wrong. So terribly, heartbreakingly wrong. The first few months after Catherine's death were strange. Melissa threw herself into renovating the house, spending money on upgrades that seemed unnecessary to me, but that she insisted would increase the property value. She hired contractors, picked out expensive fixtures, transformed every room into something modern and sleek that looked nothing like the home I'd known. I tried to stay out of her way, tried to be invisible, like I'd learned to be with Robert. I worked my shifts at the diner, came home late, spent most of my time in my bedroom. But I could feel something shifting, could sense that my time in this house was running out. It started small. Melissa would make comments about how much space I was taking up, how convenient it would be if she had that extra bedroom for a home office. She'd mention how much money she was spending on utilities and how having another person in the house increased those costs. She never asked me directly to leave, but the message was clear. I offered to pay more rent, to contribute more to household expenses. I just turned 60, and my body was screaming at me to retire from waitressing, but I picked up extra shifts anyway. Anything to prove I was worth keeping around, worth the space I occupied. Then came my 60th birthday. I didn't expect a celebration. I never celebrated my birthdays, never made a fuss. But Melissa didn't even acknowledge it. She was home that day, working on her laptop in the living room, and I waited all day for her to say something, anything. She never did. That evening, I made myself dinner alone in the kitchen. As I sat at the table eating, Melissa came in and sat down across from me. Her face was serious, determined. "Aunt Dorothy, we need to talk." My heart started pounding. I knew that tone. I'd heard it before, years ago, when Robert had first started making me feel unwelcome. "I've been thinking about my future," she said, "about what I want my life to look like. And I've realized that I need this house to myself. I'm 26 years old, and I want to start my life properly. Maybe get married someday. Have kids. I can't do that with you here." The words hit me like physical blows. "But your mother's will, I've talked to a lawyer," she interrupted. "Mom's will said I had to let you stay as long as reasonable. But the lawyer says that's too vague to be enforceable. And honestly, Aunt Dorothy, it's not reasonable anymore. You're 60 years old. You should be thinking about retirement communities, assisted living places. This house is for someone with a future, not someone whose life is basically over." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This was Melissa, my Melissa, telling me my life was over, telling me I didn't deserve a place in the home I'd helped maintain for years. "You raised me," I said, my voice shaking. "I loved you like you were my own daughter. I gave up everything for you, for your mother. And I appreciate that. she said, but her voice was cold, clinical. But that doesn't mean you get to live here forever. I'm giving you 30 days to find somewhere else to go. That's more than fair. 30 days. After everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given, I got 30 days. The next morning, I woke up to find that the locks on the house had been changed. I'd gone out to my car to get something. And when I tried to get back in, my key didn't work. I knocked on the door, and Melissa answered it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, I forgot to mention," she said. "I changed the locks for security. Here's your new key, but just for the next 30 days. Remember." I took the key with shaking hands, and that's when I knew. This wasn't grief talking. This wasn't temporary. Melissa had decided I was disposable, and nothing I said or did was going to change her mind. I spent those 30 days in a fog of disbelief and heartbreak. I looked at apartments I couldn't afford, contacted retirement communities that had years-long waiting lists. I called distant relatives and old friends, but no one had space for a 60-year-old woman with no real savings and no prospects. On day 29, I tried one last time. I sat Melissa down and begged. Actually begged. "Please," I said. "Please don't do this. I have nowhere to go. Everything I have, everything I am, I gave to this family. You can't just throw me away." She looked at me with something close to contempt. "You're being dramatic," she said. "And honestly, Aunt Dorothy, you're being greedy. You got an inheritance from Great Aunt Helen. You have money. You just don't want to spend it. You'd rather live off me, just like you lived off my mother all those years." Greedy. She called me greedy. Me, who had given up college, career, marriage, children, everything, to take care of her family. Me, who had worked myself to exhaustion for decades so they could have better lives. Something broke inside me in that moment, but something else hardened too. A resolve I didn't know I possessed. "Fine," I said quietly. "I'll be gone tomorrow." That night, I packed my life into 2 suitcases and 1 box. 60 years reduced to 3 containers. Before I left, I went to Catherine's room, the room Melissa had already transformed into her master suite. I stood there in the dark, remembering my sister's last days, her last words to me. And I remembered something else. Something Catherine had given me 6 months before she died, something Melissa didn't know about. I'm standing in my own home now. Not an apartment, not a retirement community, but a real home. It's small, but it's mine. Every inch of it legally, completely mine. And sitting on my kitchen table is a copy of the document that made this possible. You see, Catherine knew her daughter better than Melissa thought. During one of her clear moments, near the end, she'd called me into her room and handed me an envelope. "This is the real will," she'd said. "The other one is a test. I want to see what Melissa does when I'm gone, whether she honors her word, whether she treats you with the love and respect you deserve. If she does, this document stays secret, and everything goes to her like the first will says. But if she doesn't, if she tries to push you out, you give this to a lawyer. This will supersedes the other one. It leaves you 50% of everything, the house, the money, all of it. You've earned it, Dorothy. And if Melissa can't see that, then she doesn't deserve to have everything handed to her." I'd kept that document hidden, hoping I'd never have to use it, hoping Melissa would prove to be better than she was. But when she called me greedy and threw me out, I finally understood what Catherine had known, that Melissa had inherited her father's selfishness along with her mother's beauty. The legal battle took 8 months. Melissa fought hard, claimed the second will was forged that I'd manipulated her dying mother. But Catherine had been smart. She'd had the document notarized, witnessed by her doctor and her lawyer, people who could testify to her sound mind. The will was ironclad. When the judge ruled in my favor, Melissa had to sell the house. We split the proceeds 50-50, along with Catherine's remaining money. It was enough for me to buy this little place and have savings left over. Enough to finally, at 60 years old, retire from the diner and live on my own terms. Melissa hasn't spoken to me since the verdict. She tells people I'm a monster, that I stole her inheritance, that I betrayed her family. Let her tell those stories. I know the truth, and so does anyone who was paying attention all those years. The real lesson here isn't about revenge, though I won't lie and say it doesn't feel good to have justice. The real lesson is this: give everything for family if you choose, but never forget your own worth. Never let anyone make you feel like your sacrifices mean nothing. And never, ever believe that blood guarantees loyalty or that love guarantees respect. I spent 40 years being invisible, being the backup, being the one who made everyone else's lives possible while my own slipped away. I told myself it was noble, that it was love, and maybe it was for a long time. But it's also okay to save yourself. It's okay to use that last card you've been holding, the one you hoped you'd never need. It's okay to demand what you've earned. I'm 61 now. I have a small house, a garden I'm learning to tend, and time that's finally my own. I have books I want to read, places I want to see, a life I'm just beginning to live. Is it too late? Maybe. But maybe it's also right on time. Catherine knew what she was doing when she gave me that second will. She was giving me permission to choose myself, to stop sacrificing, to finally be greedy in the only way that matters, greedy for my own happiness, my own peace, my own life. So here's what I want you to take from my story. Be careful who you give everything to. Love your family, help them when they need it, but don't lose yourself completely in the process. And if you ever find yourself at 60 with nothing but a suitcase and a betrayal, remember that sometimes the meek don't inherit the earth. Sometimes they have to fight for their small piece of it. That second will wasn't revenge. It was Catherine's final act of love for the sister who had loved her unconditionally, who had given up everything, who had earned so much more than she ever asked for. And Melissa's cruelty wasn't what gave me this house. It was 30 years of devotion that finally got recognized. I sleep well at night now. For the first time in decades, I sleep well. And if that makes me greedy in Melissa's eyes, then so be it. I'll be greedy. I've earned that right. This is Dorothy Reynolds, and this is my story. Not the story of the spinster aunt who everyone pitied, but the story of a woman who learned, even at 60, that it's never too late to claim what's yours. Thank you for listening. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever felt invisible or taken for granted, I want you to know that you matter. Your sacrifices matter. Your life matters. Don't wait as long as I did to remember that. Take care of yourselves. And remember, silent doesn't mean weak. Sometimes the quietest revenge is simply surviving, thriving, and finally living the life you always deserved.